everyone, it's Nina and welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to be doing a video talking about all of the new releases I read in 2022. I'm going to be ranking these books from my lowest rated to my highest rated. The books on the end of this list are not even ones I necessarily would consider particularly bad. They just are ones that didn't work very well for me personally and were just often pretty disappointing. A lot of booktubers will usually do their best and worst books of the years as kind of a mishmash of things they've read from a bunch of different release years, but I wanted to have kind of a cumulative list of all of the ones that I read that came out in 2022, just in case you want to see kind of what came out last year that you're interested in picking up. Anyway, with that intro out of the way, let's get into the video. The first book we're going to be talking about is Gallant by V.E. Schwab. This book has a 3.78 rating on Goodreads. This is a YA gothic fantasy that follows the main character, Olivia. She is living in an orphanage and gets a letter from an uncle who she's never met inviting her to their family home of Gallant. But the only thing she knows about her family is from her deceased mother's diary, and in that book, her mother pleads for her to never ever go to Gallant. However, her desire to have a family wins out, and as soon as she gets there, she kind of learns about this supernatural force that has been plaguing their family for generations. This book is often grouped in as being lower YA, which basically means that the plot depth and writing style is targeted at a more younger teen demographic than typical YA is. Personally, I found this book to be very boring and repetitive, and I really disliked a lot of aspects of the writing structure, where there was a lot of bizarre flashbacks that I think cut into scenes and ended up just drawing a lot of tension. I ended up giving this book a 2.5 stars, so that's just kind of showing how low this list is going to go. Again, none of these books I read this last year were absolutely horrible. I just had a couple ones lower on this list that I just found were a little boring as their main flaw. So let's move on to the next set of books. The first one on that list is Notes on Execution by Dania Kukavka. This book has a Goodreads average of 4.14. This book is the story of a serial killer named Ansel, and it's told through three women in his life: his mother, his wife's twin sister, and the detective who put him in jail, who he also knew when he was a child. This book deals with a lot of interesting themes of if people can be redeemed if they've committed heinous crimes, concepts of nature versus nurture, and also maybe in alternate realities if there are versions of ourselves that are better people. However, I feel like all of the themes that the story tackled were done in very surface level ways. I also think it was very stereotypical in aspects of Ansel's backstory and personality. This book isn't bad, but at the same time I think you can get a lot more out of reading a nonfiction book on a similar topic. Although at the same time I know with reading a nonfiction book, obviously with true crime there's a lot of baggage and more worry in dealing with real life people that have been victims of crimes. So reading a fictionalized version of a serial killer is probably a more safe bet. The next book we're going to be talking about is Anatomy of Love Story by Dana Schwartz. This book has a Goodreads average of 3.8. This is a YA historical fantasy set in the 1800s that follows our main character Hazel, who is a wealthy young woman who is trying to become a surgeon. She ends up teaming up with a boy named Jack, who is stealing corpses for her to practice with, and there's also some magical mystery elements in the story as well. My main flaw with this book is that I found a lot of Hazel's choices to be really frustrating. I also felt like the overall pacing was off and there wasn't nearly enough magic or a clear antagonist until the very end, and that ending felt very much like sequel bait for me. I think the romance of this book was the one saving factor. I genuinely felt that Hazel and Jack had a really good connection, and their scenes were quite sweet and heartfelt. However, that isn't enough to keep me interested in the long run, so I'm not planning on picking up the sequel. I ended up giving this book a 3 stars. The next book on this list is What Moves the Dead by T. Kingfisher. This is a Goodreads average of a 3.98. This is a retelling of the Edgar Allan Poe short story, The Fall of the House of Usher. And in this story, our main character Alex is going at the behest of their childhood friends to join them at their decrepit family home. However, once they get there, they realize the blighted landscape has transformed the flora and fauna for the worse, and it's also possibly contributing to this mysterious illness that the Usher siblings are suffering from. This is a very short novella. It's only 150 pages, so there's honestly not a lot to comment on. I think this didn't work for me for pretty personal reasons, mostly because I find that the twist and the thing that is causing all of the malintent in the story is something that I don't really find very scary. I also felt with the climax, it basically was they make the decision of what they want to do, and then it hard cuts to after the thing having been done and them dealing with the aftermath, and I was why did we not see any of that happening in the book itself? This book was definitely a big disappointment for me because I know T. Kingfisher is very well loved on BookTube. However, I do think it's kind of pretty much a universal opinion that this is not one of their best books, so I think I would be interested in checking out another one of their books in the future. Probably shying away from their horror books and maybe focusing instead on one of their more lighthearted fantasy stories. and this book I ended up giving a 3 stars to. The next book on this list is Wrath Goddess Sing by Maya Dean. This is a 3.53 rating on Goodreads, and this is a Iliad retelling where Achilles is reimagined as a trans woman and also the daughter of Athena, and she is tasked by her mother to stop Helen, who in this version of the story is a god who is orchestrating the Trojan War to gain power. I thought all of the trans aspects of the story were really interesting and well done. What I didn't really like is that I feel like there were some plot threads that didn't really go anywhere, and there also were other ones that I felt like were directly contradicted in later parts of the story, and overall just made this book a very confusing reading experience for me. I also felt like so much of the mythology was being played around with in ways where it didn't really resemble Greek myth all that much, and I feel like I really needed the anchoring of that original mythos to hold onto, even if you wanted to change other aspects of the story. I guess I kind of went into the story expecting it to be a pretty typical Iliad retelling, except Achilles was going to be a trans woman. But there honestly was so much more going on that I wasn't really a fan of. I think personally Maya Dean is a really talented writer in terms of her prose, and I think she needs to write an adult fantasy book where she can do a world of her own creation. If she does another mythology retelling, I probably won't be interested, but if she went in that direction, I definitely would be interested in checking out other books of hers in the future. I ended up giving this book a 3 stars. The next book on this list is The Girl Who Fell Beneath the Sea by Axie O. This book has a 4.7 average on Goodreads. This book follows our main character Mina, who sacrifices herself to become a bride of the sea god as part of this yearly ritual to appease the god and allow their village to continue flourishing. This ritual involves throwing young women into the ocean to apparently drown, but in fact Mina gets transported to the spirit world. There she meets the members of the Lotus House who are guarding the sea god from his many enemies. And with their begrudging help, Mina works on a plan to both help the sea god be free from his imprisonment as well as find a way home. This book I think also follows closer to the lower YA category. I think it's a very fun and lighter fantasy story. A lot of people say that it has very heavy Spirited Away vibes. I think the big thing for me is that I just don't think for me this is going to be something I'm going to stick with in the long run. It has all the makings of being someone else's 5 stars. I think a lot of the aspects of the book are really well done. But for me, there just wasn't really that spark for me to really want to hold it close and consider it one of my favorite books of the year. So this book I only end up giving a 3 stars. The next book on this list is Elektra by Jennifer Saint. This book has a 3.74 average on Goodreads, and this is a Greek mythology retelling that focuses on Clytemnestra, who is the wife of Agamemnon, as well as their daughter Elektra. And there's also some POV chapters from Cassandra, who is a princess of Troy, whose story intersects with the other women a little later on in the book. I think if this is your first version of hearing this myth, you probably will like it a little more than I did. I had previously heard a version of it in 10,000 Shifts, and I just liked that version more. I think by making the title Elektra, it makes it seem like she is the main character and the one who is in the right. But I am so much more on Clytemnestra's side, and I think having to spend so much time with Elektra, who I didn't really like and didn't really agree with, definitely made me pretty frustrated and like this book a lot less. This is pretty disappointing for me because I previously read Ariadne by Jennifer Saint, and I really enjoyed that book. But I do have high hopes for enjoying her next mythology retelling. This book, though, I gave a 3.5 stars. The next book on this list is A Restless Truth by Freya Marsk. This book has a 4.08 average on Goodreads, and this is the sequel to A Marvelous Light. It follows Maud, who is the younger sister of the main character in the previous book, Robin. This is a historical Edwardian lesbian fantasy romance coupled with a murder mystery set on a ship. This book was really disappointing for me. It was definitely a 5-star prediction. I thought I was going to really like it considering how much I liked the previous book in the series. But unfortunately, I feel like this had the major failing of being a romance book where I didn't really like the romance. I felt like the sex scenes in this book really had a personal squick of mine where I was like, ew. And I think that really hindered my enjoyment of their main character's relationship. It also took 2/3 of the way to get into the larger plot. But after it did, I think the last third of this book I really enjoyed. I still am planning on reading the last book in the trilogy, mostly because it is following a character that we got to see a lot more of in this book. And I really, really enjoyed him here as a side character, so hopefully he's still able to continue that energy on when he's the main character. The next book on this list is Daisy Darker by Alice Feeney. This book has a Goodreads average of a 3.84, and this is a thriller that focuses on the Darker family. They are all at the grandmother's remote seaside home for her 80th birthday, but in the middle of the night they end up finding their grandmother dead. At first they're like, she fell, she was old, we kind of knew that this would eventually happen, but then some suspicious stuff makes them think that there is someone else on the island, and that each member of the family is being picked off one by one. A lot of people have pointed out a lot of the flaws in Alice Feeney's writing style, and I feel like they were a lot more prevalent in this one than in the previous book that I had read from her. I also didn't like the majority of the characters because they were all just so unlikable. However, I did think the twist at the end was so different and so out there that I feel like I at least respect it for being so weird. And it ended up being enjoyable enough for me to bump it up from being a 2.5 to what I eventually rated it as a 3.5. From here on out, all the books we're going to be talking about are the ones that I rated 4 stars and above, so these are all the books that I really enjoyed that came out last year. The first set of books that we're going to be talking about is the second, third, and fourth volumes of the Scum Villain Self-Saving System by MXTX. I'm lumping in the first one also in this because it came out in December of 2021, and it's pretty much all like one continuous story, so I feel like it makes sense to still have it here, even if it didn't technically come out in 2022. On Goodreads, this has a kind of cumulative rating of 4.3 stars for all of the books. In the story, our main character is transported from the real world into the world of this web novel, and he is put into the body of one of the main villains, Shen Qingqiu. And as Qingqiu, he's planning on trying to change the plot of the book so he's not killed off by the main book's hero, who is Lua Binghe. But he ends up going a little bit too far and ends up making Binghe fall in love with him. I think this was the first Danmei series that I started reading, and I did like this, but I didn't love it. I think mostly because even at the end, I was still not 100% on Qingqiu and Binghe's relationship. I feel like throughout a lot of this book, I was just so frustrated with a lot of Qingqiu's choices, and their communication skills being really flawed just made it hard for me to see them as a healthy couple. But at the same time, I thought that there was a lot of really funny parts, and some of the moments of like absurdist humor really worked for me. So I ended up giving each book in this series a 4 stars. The next book we are going to be talking about is Our Wives Under the Sea by Julia Armfield. This has a Goodreads rating of 3.9, which definitely should be higher. This is a horror literary fiction. It follows a couple of Miri and Leah. The one wife, Leah, is part of this expedition in a submarine that ends up getting stuck at the depths of the ocean for an extended period of time. So there's 2 timelines, one following Leah when she is in the submarine, as well as a timeline that's following Miri once Leah has come back up and kind of showing how their relationship has changed. I really, really liked this book. It was one of my most anticipated releases of 2022. And I was actually pleasantly surprised that this ended up being on a lot of people's best list for this year, kind of as like a sleeper hit from 2022. One of the things I liked foremost in this book was that I just think that it showed a lesbian relationship in a way that I can tell that the author is a queer woman as well. There were just so many small details that I really resonated with. I do think this horror is a little bit on the lighter side, but I also feel like it did a good job with being very unsettling and shocking at the times where it was used. In this book, I ended up rating 4 stars. The next book on this list is Portrait of a Thief by Grace D. Lee. This book has a Goodreads average rating of 3.52, which is honestly shocking to me. I feel like that is so low considering how good I think this book is. I guess you would classify this book as like a contemporary thriller. The main character, Will, gets this offer from an enigmatic Chinese company to steal back 5 statues that were taken from China by Western museums. He ends up gathering a team of friends who are all members of the Chinese diaspora to help him pull off these heists. This book is so fast-paced and fun. I read it in like 2 to 3 days because it just kept twisting and turning on me and I had to know what was going to happen. I also felt like all the themes in it were handled really well and the ending was just so perfect and well thought out. Again, I'm really surprised this book is so low rated on Goodreads because I feel like this is a book that pretty much anyone could pick up and enjoy. I ended up rating this book a 4.5 stars. Next book on this list is A Cruel and Fated Light by Ashley Shuttleworth. This is a Goodreads average rating of 4.38. This is the sequel to A Dark and Hollow Star, and it's set pretty much immediately after the previous book. This is a YA fae fantasy story. The main character Arlo gets invited to spend the summer at her friend Prince Vahan's palace. There's a lot of fae court drama where Vahan's mom, Rahadni, and the patriarch of Arlo's family hate each other. And Vahan's mom, Rahadni, she has been doing some shady shit, and a lot of that really hinges on her messing with her son's friend group. This book is very long, and it felt like the first half definitely took some time, and there was some kind of random scenes thrown in. I do think it really all came together by the ending, and the payoff was definitely really great. I loved all the twists and all of the character moments in this book. I was also pleasantly surprised because this book really follows the character Celadon, who was one of my favorite characters from the previous book. And overall, I'm just so excited to see where this series goes, and I'm really sad I have to basically wait 9 months for the next one. I ended up giving this book a 4.5 stars. The next books on this list are the second and third volume of the Grandmaster Demonic Cultivation by MXTX. This book series has a general Goodreads average of 4.6. This series follows our main character Wei Wuxian, who basically, like the title says, was the Grandmaster of Demonic Cultivation, who was feared and hated even after his death. He ends up getting reincarnated in this random guy's body who ends up sacrificing himself so Wei Wuxian can live again. And Wei Wuxian is planning on laying low, but ends up running into someone from his past who is Lan Wangji, and gets kind of swept up into this larger murder mystery that is taking the Cultivation world by storm. I really, really love this series. I am so glad that I ended up reading it. Each volume was building up to be better and better, and then the third volume, it finally hit a 5 stars for me. This volume really had everything. It had really great action, there was so much backstory, really emotional and sweet friendship bonding moments, as well as a lot of really sweet romantic moments. I'm just really obsessed with the character arcs that we got to see in this book, and I'm so excited to read the last final volume. I'm still going to count the series as being a 4.5 overall, but hopefully the next volume will also be a 5 stars for me. And the last book on this list, the only 5 stars from the new releases I read in 2022, was Belladonna by Adeline Grace. This book has a Goodreads average rating of 4.6. I'm really bad at describing this book, but I'm going to try my best. This book follows our main character, Signa. Signa has a magical ability that makes her so that she's unable to die. Poison ends up killing everyone in her family when she was a baby, and in scenarios where she would have normally died, she ends up just seeing death as this personified man who she grows to hate. As a result of her family's death, she's kind of bounced around different caregivers, kind of a la series of unfortunate events vibes, but eventually is sent to live with her aunt and their family. However, immediately upon arriving there, she learns that her aunt has passed away under mysterious circumstances. So Signa ends up teaming up with Death to try and work and solve through the mystery of what happened. I just really, really love this book. Supreme among those reasons is because I just really love the romance between Signa and Death. It just has so many of my favorite tropes in it. Talking about the story as a whole, I do think that it did a good job of balancing just the right amount of atmospheric, spooky vibes, and the horror scenes were very sparingly used so that they had maximum effect. I think the overarching mystery was okay, but I think at the same time it did what it needed to do to kind of just be set dressing for the character's romance, and also to see the character development of Signa alone as well. Overall, I'm so happy that I read this book, and I cannot wait for the sequel to come out in 2023. So like I said, this book is the only book I gave 5 stars. So that is a look at all of the 2022 releases that I read. This was kind of like the first year where I was being pretty vigilant and looking at all of the new releases that were coming out and seeing which ones I was interested in checking out. There definitely were a couple that I did not get to that I'm planning on reading in 2023. So consider subscribing to stay updated on other videos that I have coming out in the near future. I'm also going to do my darndest and read as many of the 2023 releases that I'm interested in as they come out so I can update you on that as well. But overall, that is going to be it for me today. Thank you guys, as always, so much for watching my videos. Please consider liking this video or subscribing if you aren't already. I'm also kind of transitioning my old cosplay Instagram into being a bookstagram. I'm going to have that linked on my channel page for right now because I think I might be changing my username in the near future, but I'm going to be working hard on doing a lot more in-depth reviews of books on there. So if you're interested in that, please consider checking it out and following me on Instagram. But with that long outro out of the way, I hope you guys have a wonderful day, and I will see you all in the next video. Bye!